Hello, everyone. I'm Jerry Wills. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you about something I think you'll find very interesting. Other people I've spoken to about this, they found it interesting. It has to do with UFOs, contact with extraterrestrials, and a whole number of things that involve people from other worlds coming to this one. Why this happens, at least what I was told about it, and where we as a people on this world are going, what the possibilities are for you. The name of my lecture is called Earthbound, and the reason it's called that is because for me, a long time ago, 1953, I was deposited in an abandoned house in central Kentucky. I remember just vague images of this. Within 12 hours, there were officials who came to this place. At the time in the United States, there was no Air Force. Instead, there was an organization within the Army that was called the Army Air Corps. They retrieved me from this place, and they took me to Fort Knox. And there I resided at the hospital, and I don't know for how long. I'm really not sure if it was 1953. It might have been 1952. I just don't know. Once I was in this hospital, I was taken care of. Because you see, the Army had been given a message that I was going to be placed there. But they got the time wrong. So instead of showing up at the appropriate time, they showed up 12 hours later, and I had frostbite over most of my body. I was not doing very well. So I remained in the hospital for a while. Eventually, there was a man who was in the armed services, in the Army. He and his wife could not have children. And the reason is because when she was younger, she was playing with something called radium. It's radioactive. And when you get it inside of you, it destroys your reproductive system. So they adopted me. Now, these things that I'm telling you are things that I found out much later in life, because when I was growing up, I had no idea why things were happening as they were. I had, I had no idea that this wasn't my mother and father. I didn't look like them. I was very different. When I was about 3 years old, something happened and I got very sick. By this time, my family had moved from Fort Knox to Denver, Colorado. And in Denver, Colorado, he was given a job in the government. I became quite ill, and at that time, there were these people who showed up that I remember very vividly. They didn't look normal. They actually were about 5 foot tall, but they had large heads and black eyes. They were scary. But they seemed to know what they were doing, and so they treated me, and I got better very quickly. By the time I was 4 years old, my father and mother would take me to a place in outside of Miami, Florida, into the Everglades. I was told we were going there to meet with my Uncle Sam. So every year after this, we would go and meet with my Uncle Sam. We would go there and ride in a big black car. We would go out across the Everglades. We would get in a boat, and we would go down one of these channels of water, and eventually there would be these tents. There were soldiers. I was given a stick of gum, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was back in the hotel in Miami, and then we would go to the beach. This continued on for several years, until I was 7. At 7 years old, my father had a heart attack and died. And my mother moved from Denver back to Kentucky. But before this happened, officials came demanding that she give me to them. These officials were wearing black suits. Some of them had decorations. They were soldiers, high-ranking officials. And they wanted me. But she didn't let them have me. We moved to Kentucky, and that's where I grew up. From that point forward, life was very different, because we grew up really in the woods, away from everyone. And this is where things became much easier in relation to the extraterrestrial contacts. At the time, I didn't know that was the case, but I learned this to be how it was later on. In Kentucky, there were a lot of UFO sightings. A lot of people were seeing things that they couldn't explain. And because of that, there was a lot of fear. And perhaps here in your country, this beautiful Norway, you might have been afraid of the Russians as well, I don't know. But in the United States, there was a very deep, foreboding fear that the Russians would come and conquer us, and nuclear bombs and all of these terrible things that we were told. There was a lot of fear because no one knew who the people flying the UFOs might be. They had no idea. I was 12 years old, almost 13. And one afternoon, a very, very large craft came out from the trees and presented itself in front of me. It was about a half a mile away, which would be about a kilometer, I think, maybe a little less. It was so large that it was hard to imagine that something like that could actually move against the wind and just float through the air. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this. And it sat there above the trees, and its lights were gently pulsing over and over. And in that moment, it gave me an inspiration, and I think a message. And it was very simple. The message was, "We see you. We'll come talk to you soon." You could see the moonlight glinting off of the shiny surface of this. It was massive. The very next summer, I went into the woods as I normally would. I was going to meet a friend of mine. He never showed up. Instead, there was a man who came and sat down and talked with me, but he was very strangely dressed. In Kentucky, it's very hot, and there's a lot of humidity. And this man was in a one-piece outfit that went right to his neck, long sleeves, long pants, that you couldn't tell where the pants ended and the boots began. He came up and knew me by name. He wanted to talk. So we had a short discussion. All the while, I had really no idea who he might be or why he would want to talk with me, but he seemed friendly enough, and why not? It was during this conversation that words were no longer used, and it was information that was transferred telepathically between he and I. And we had quite a nice conversation. But then he said he had to leave. And he stood up, walked away, and that was all. After this, there were these messages that began to show up. Not messages in words, but messages in a sound in my head. It was like Morse code. It was a beeping, whistling sound. And I understood that when I heard this, that I should go and take a look, because every time I heard it before, I would see a disc. You've probably heard of Billy Myers. It was a disc like this. And it was people like that. This disc would come and land back in the back fields, back in the trees. And I was not at first allowed to go close to it. Instead, they would come out and they would come and talk with me. These things that we would discuss at first were very general. There wasn't a lot of what I would consider to be earth-shattering information or really, really important things. It was more a discussion, a dialogue that between ourselves, what life was like. And you know, I'm 13 years old. I didn't really have a lot to say. After the first year, however, things changed. And when they would show up, then they would bring others with them. And these people would then become my teachers. They had information to share with me. And this information was shared in a very unique and unusual way. You know, when you have a memory stick and you plug it into your computer, how all the information can just be put in there and then suddenly it's in your computer. This is how they would provide information for me. It was as though they put this massive amount of communication directly into my mind. And I had no idea what it was. Just a lot of detail. It was shortly after this began that I started developing a very serious headache. It was what you might call a migraine. And when they showed up, and they were showing up every week, then I told them that this was hurting. I couldn't do this. It was still hurting. It didn't stop. They were quite alarmed, and they wanted to find out why. So they took me inside. I sat down in a sort of chair. It wasn't like a chair like you're sitting on now. Laid back, and they somehow took a look to find out what was wrong. I went to sleep, and when I woke up, they told me the problem had been resolved. You see, the issue was my left and right hemispheres needed to be linked together, and that would allow me to access everything that they were doing. After that, I never had any more headaches. However, at 15 years old, I had a photographic memory, and I was hungry for knowledge, and I would read everything that I could find. Dictionaries, I knew all the words. The encyclopedias, I read through all of them. It was boring. But I had a vocabulary that would stagger my teachers, and they didn't like it. I started reading everything that had been written by the greats. For example, everything written by Edgar Allan Poe, everything written by Shakespeare. I was studying music without the benefit of a music class or a music teacher. Everything. Everything that Einstein had done. Everything from Tesla. All the science and chemistry and mathematics books that I could digest. I was doing fourth year mathematics, college mathematics, in the 8th grade. And then all this information that they had been putting into my mind began to make sense. Now I had a framework because the mathematics was actually the key part of what they had given me. Without mathematics, there wasn't a whole picture. Instead, there were just fragments. But with the mathematics, now I understood. When I was 16, and I had amassed all this knowledge, they taught me the history of the universe. At least they're part of it. The universe is quite large. To know the entire history of such a large and large expansive place, I suppose, would be nearly impossible. But they taught me the history as they knew it. And then they went into sociology. The social structure of different worlds. This world, their world, and other worlds that are inhabited by people that look just like you and I. The geology, the atmospheric conditions, the religion. All of these things seem to be very important for them to teach me. Why? I'm not really sure. Maybe it's because they wanted to find out how much I could take in before I would explode. But I didn't explode, obviously, and I continued to amass more and more levels of knowledge. And then it went into another direction altogether. Some people call it a direction that involves spirituality. Some call it quantum mechanics. Back when I was 16, quantum mechanics was not a term that anyone was familiar with. It hadn't even been invented yet, so far as I know. But it went on to describe the rationale of the universe, how things work, and how we as observers are responsible for the outcome, and how we, collectively, direct the energies of the universe towards potential solutions or problems, and how either with apathy we allow things to degenerate and go stale, or because we have an active participation in the creation of the next moment together, collectively, that things change. And there were several examples of that, both for this world and for others. To finish off all of these things that they were teaching me, by the time I was 18 years old, I had been enlisted to play basketball because my stature, I'm 6'9". So they wanted me to be a basketball star. But I wasn't that interested. I couldn't understand the concept of the competition, because in the way that they were trying to show me how things work in an organized universe, and then the people who were showing me how I was supposed to play basketball with an enthusiasm to beat the other guy however badly I could, and then be very happy that I had beat them, that didn't make sense. It seemed illogical. So I was not a very good basketball player. I felt that if you're going to be in competition, it should be competition where everyone wins. Although someone does win, it doesn't have to mean the denigration of the people who've lost. It should serve as a template for them to also be able to win at some other point. That's not how it was seen where I grew up. It was beat 'em, live or die, black and white. There were no in-betweens. So I was not a very good basketball player, and I stopped playing. It was when I turned 18 that they told me that it was now time for me to go out into the world, to live among the others on this world, to understand what it's like to be here. That seemed like an odd way of characterizing a departure from home, but I didn't think anything of it. I was used to the way that they spoke to me. They wanted me to go out and be like everyone else. It's not that easy when you're as tall as I am, but I tried. And as I moved through life for the next several years, I was successful in business, and I did my best to improve myself as best I could. But I didn't do a very good job of it. They told me when they left at 18 years old that they would come and see me again in 10 years. Well, that seems like a very long time. But at the end of 10 years, they did show up, and in a very unusual way. Once again, the beeping sounds, and then a series of very vivid dreams where I was being shown to go to a place that I had never been before. I had no idea how I was going to get there, or even where it was for sure, but events transpired, and I found myself in the deserts of Nevada. This is an area we now call Area 51, Dreamland. But at the time, Area 51 was not generally known, and Dreamland was not even spoken of. I arrived in this remote place, an old ghost town, and a series of events took place there that were really quite bizarre and, well, a bit life-changing for me. You see, we were driving, I was with this other person, and we were driving back from Reno. That's where I met Brad Steiger. Tim Beckley had a UFO conference. I'd never been to one. I found it fascinating, and so I showed up there. And as we are driving back to Phoenix, the car runs out of gas, and we're stuck in this ghost town, and the fellow who's driving coasts into the filling station. In the filling station, there is a man who is dressed as though he just came off of a Hollywood movie. He looks like a cowboy with the hat and the boots and the shirt and all of this. And he comes out and says that, after we fill the gas, and George, the fellow who was filling the gas I was riding with, he can't find his wallet. And the fellow tells George, don't worry about it. It's at the other town, that you stopped in several hours ago. I'll go get it. You wait here. And so we did. So as we're sitting there waiting, it never occurred to us, how would this man know where we had been, and how would he even know George's wallet? It was as though something was very cloudy in our minds. After about 30 minutes, I got up and started walking through this ghost town. And as I'm moving through the ghost town, I look in a window and I spot something shiny in the window. It turns out to be a crystal ball. I didn't bring it with me to show you. Because of airport security, sometimes they mishandle things. It's a very difficult thing to travel with. This crystal ball was sitting in a bowl, and as I walked inside of the building, this woman walks out who looks like she walked off of a Hollywood movie, like someone's grandmother. Has a nice apron, she has her hair up in a bun, little glasses, and she walks out and she says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was here. It looked like a ghost town." She says, No, it's all right. What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I noticed the crystal ball in your display case." And she grabbed her chest and says, "Oh my stars, you must be Jerry." And I said, "Yeah." She says, "They told me you were coming." "Yes." And she pulls the crystal ball out, she puts it down on the counter. And she proceeds to tell me that the people that I had had contact with during my teen years, who said they would be back in 10, had shown up there a couple of days ago and left it there for her to give to me. And she proceeded to tell me all the story about them and gave me enough information to where there was no doubt that she was talking about the same people. It was quite an extraordinary event for me, because after 10 years your memory fades slightly. And even though it's so relevant and real, you look back on it as though, oh, do I remember this the way that I thought that I did? You've probably had the same thing. Well, she filled in many of the blanks and helped refresh my mind of all of these events that had taken place. I was astonished. It was so comprehensive that I decided I should record this. So I had a little pocket recorder. This was back in the early 80s. Had a little bitty cassette of tape and a little button you push. And so I started to record this conversation. She told me it was fine, but that I couldn't record her voice. I could only record my own. I didn't believe that. Well, as it turns out, I couldn't record her voice. So I put the recorder away. I was rather confused at that point because I know electronics quite well. I don't know how that could happen. She proceeded to tell me how to use this crystal ball, what it was meant for, and what could be done with it. Once all was communicated with me, this fellow that had gone somewhere, we don't know where, he shows up in the truck and he has the wallet. He gives it to George, who then pays him for the gas, and we leave. It's like the Twilight Zone, isn't it? We get out of town about 2 miles, and the car we're in chugs, and slows down and stops. We stop. Now what's wrong? We get out of the car and look around, and off to the right, down over there is where the old ghost town was at. And off to the right, from behind those buildings, two discs come out from the buildings. They proceed right across in front of us, go over some low hills, and then go behind the hills, and they're gone. Two of them. Within seconds, there are jet fighters that are racing across the desert. You could hear them coming. And they were screaming across the desert. Not very high, maybe 200 feet off the floor. Dust was, it was really amazing to see. And they followed where the UFOs had gone. They were gone. Last we ever saw of either of them. Got back in the car, it started up, we came back to Phoenix. At that point, it would again be another 10 years. And there weren't that many unusual things that happened. I led a rather ordinary life. You see, I was married to someone who didn't like all of this, that didn't want to talk about any of this. Yeah, I got married in that period of time, and thought that I was being foolish if I were to relate any of my experiences publicly. And I figured that it was interesting, and if someone wanted to hear it, that's fine. And she said, no, people are going to think you want them to believe it. I don't care if you believe it or not, I would say, because it isn't important that you believe it. It's information. It's passing on details. Well, needless to say, the relationship didn't last. But another 10 years did pass. And at the end of that next 10 years, there were a few events that took place that were, again, quite unusual. It was the middle of the night, and there was an amber-colored light that we could see down the hall towards the front room. And it was dim, and then it was bright. And the next thing you know, she was worried and afraid and got up, and then she came back like she was in a trance, laid back down in bed, said, it's nothing, laid down, and went to sleep. But I could still see the light. So I laid there watching this. The light dimmed down again, and it was like in between the blinks of an eye, there was a man standing in our room. And there was just enough light from this dim amber light just down the hall that I could see his face, barely, and his stature. And I recognized him. His name was Zoe. He was the one who I'd spoken with all those years ago when I was a teenager. He had shown up and he wanted to have a discussion. So we talked. What we talked about at that point, again, was a life-changing event. He told me that there were some things that I needed to know, that they were very concerned, they being him and the others that he was affiliated with, that they were very concerned that it would have an emotional impact on me, that it might be damaging to my psyche. And I said, what kind of information could this be? And I felt very strong inside. He said, well, your mother is going to die in 2 months. And when she dies, there's going to be information that is going to surface. And it's about you being adopted. How do you feel about that? And I said, well, I don't look like anyone in that family. None of them have the characteristics that I have. They're so different from me. It's actually a relief. He says, but your mother is going to die in 2 months. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. But I never really felt like she was my mother. He says, all right, then I need to tell you the rest. From that point forward, he related to me where my origins begin, who I am, and in part, what I've been doing here all this time. This place is a planet that's not smaller or larger than Earth. It's similar to Earth. It's a place called Lanulos, and it orbits a star. Here, the star is called Tau Ceti. It's a place very much like this place. It has seasons, it has cold areas and warm areas. It has people just like you. It's just a different place. In the history that they had taught me about humankind and the people of this world and so forth, it was very clearly shown to me how people on this world didn't originate here. They were brought here, and they weren't brought here like, hey, come on, you're going to have to go or else. People came here because they wanted to, because it was another place, another outpost of humankind. And really, you're not human. But that's a whole different subject and a whole different story. You've been led to believe you are. But we'll call it humankind, so we have a point of common reference. People like yourselves exist on many worlds out there in the cosmos. You don't know this because that information's been kept from you. But he went on to tell me that part of the reason why I was brought here, you see, I'm not unique in that respect. It isn't just that I was brought here and so that makes me special. It doesn't. You were brought here too in some past generational scheme. You see, there were a lot of people who were brought here as children. And the reason is quite simple. The last time there were things that were going to happen on this world, well, there have been a few things that have happened. But the last time there was an attempt to alter human consciousness was a few thousand years ago. And there were not just the good guys, the people with good intentions towards humankind, but there were also the bad guys, those who were not very friendly at all and had other ideas. So they tried to alter the way people can see themselves and understand the world around them. And in doing so, they directly interfered. When they interfered, religions were born on both sides of the equation. This group interferes and they bring a message of peace, love, hope, and charity. So the other group comes along and they interfere just as overtly. And they bring a mission with them that tells, this is how you should live your life and this is the structure, and if you don't, you die. Somewhere in time, this became cross-pollinated. And in cross-pollination, you now have a very severe attitude among those who are psychopathic, who are wanting to achieve states of power, to achieve dominion over those who would listen, and then they would have their colony. This is a very complicated thing to go into. But what it matters most to you is that who you are as people was diffused. Your understandings about who you are diffused. Your history, your true history, that goes back a very long time, obfuscated, hidden away. Because if you knew, you would be much more powerful than you are now. You wouldn't be individuals, you would be a community. And that would be dangerous to the people who are in power. So what Zoe was telling me is that there were a number of people like myself who were brought here, and that in their times past, when they came and tried to help and they put these pieces in place, religions sprung up, and now they were considered gods. That couldn't happen again. The message was lost, but the messenger received the light and the attention. The message can be rewritten by those who hold the power. The messenger can become an icon. That couldn't happen again. Instead, their plan this time was to enlist the help of various other communities out among the stars, who would allow for one of their children to be brought here, to live here, to mature here, and endure all the same things that the people who are born here would endure. You would learn to eat hot dogs and bratwurst and drink beer, smoke cigarettes, listen to really loud music, learn how to dance badly. But you would also learn what it's like to be in a community of people who are just like you, and you would be just like them. The difference would be you did not start here. And when the time came, and there was something that could possibly be done to help, it would not be help coming from the ETs. It would be someone standing by your side, just like you, who says, I think I know a better way. I have a different idea about this. Maybe I can point you in a direction. And there would be something slightly different about them, of course, because they are different. They can't help but be. And so that's how the plan was enacted and carried out. There were many of us brought here to countries all over this world. I just happened to land in the United States in a farmhouse back in the hills of Kentucky. But there are others. Some of them have yet to make their presence known. Others you might recognize if you knew who they were for sure. You might have actually some idea who they might be if you look at their actions. Because these people have no intention to become figureheads or icons. They simply want to bring information forward and to show that there are other potentials, that there are other ways, and the world can become more successful if, as a community, we work together. Zoe wanted me to understand this before he left, and he gave me another piece of advice. You see, my birthday is September 11th. And he always told me that my birthday was very, very special. Never forget it. He said there's going to come a point in time when the people of the world will be directed in one place or another. And in being directed, those choices will be made that will carry the world forward in either a direction of peace or war. Remember your birthday. It seemed a bit ominous when I was 17, and it seemed a bit uncomfortable when I was 38. I didn't really understand the dynamic that comprehensively until September 11th and the World Trade Centers came down. And at that point, suddenly I understood. The world had made a move, and it was not in a direction towards peace. It was to the contrary. Since that point in time, there have been very few contacts. There was a period of time of a few years in South America, and I'll be going into this, I think it's tomorrow, when I discuss and tell you about some of the events in South America that I have witnessed or heard about. There was a group of Pleiadians that became friends of mine, and they knew who I am. We had conversations over the course of several years. And there were encounters with other life forms, the ones that are the short gray ETs with the big dark eyes that don't seem to have your best interests at heart. And these, I'm not sure what they are or who they are. And I should know, but I don't. All I know is that they're not very friendly, and they don't seem to have a very good grasp on what it's like to be frightened. There were a few instances when I was approached in a very surprising way by them, and when this happened, I threatened them not to do that again. You see, one of the things that was provided to me during the time of those contacts in my teen years, something was done so that these individuals no longer had the ability to do mind entrainment on me. It works for just a few seconds and then it stops. To give you some idea what that means, if there were one of those beings here now, as many folks as there are in this room, they could instantly cause you to think that you were looking at, and then fill in the blanks. It could be a man, a woman, an animal, a clown. As soon as you look at them, they have you. And they'll cause you to see whatever it is that they want you to see. And you can't stop it. Not until they release you. Mentally release you. And if there are more than one of them, and there usually are, then there'll be several of these characters, and you will find yourself eventually asleep, and you'll find that they have done something with you, but you're not sure what. Some people say that they put little tags on humans. Well, they do. Part of the other thing they do is they like to harvest humans. The sperm and the ovum. You see, on other worlds, these beings are also interested in the resources of other worlds, and they use people there to do the heavy lifting, to do the work. So they harvest what they need here, and they take the babies there, grow them, and these children become adults, and these adults see these creatures as gods. And you can see evidence that that's happened here as well. It isn't unique to other worlds any more than it is unique for this one. You hear about cattle mutilations and black helicopters and all forms of strange and somewhat scary things in this regard. That's them. And you might say, well, why don't our governments protect us against them? Our governments cannot protect us against them because they hold the power. To give you some idea, if they wanted to, they could open a doorway, and I use that term figuratively, but it's like a rip in the fabric of space. They could open a doorway and just appear right here, and instantly you would be looking at them and you would just not even be able to blink. They would do what they want, then they would leave, you would blink, and it's like no time had passed. Our governments can't protect you against that any more than they can protect the people in the governments from having it happen to them. You wonder why things are so terrible. It's because these are the people who are in control. They run this world. They have for a very long time. They and others like them. So, the reason why many of us who are here is to help you understand some of these things. Not that it's to change your mind or get you to believe anything, but to just give you information. The other part of this, if you do believe, then it's time to stop believing and know. Because there's a big difference between believing and knowing. But the only way that you're going to know is if you find within yourselves what resides there, that spark that's there. Now, you might be a person who's a mechanic, or you work on computers, or you might be a farmer, or you might be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, fisherman perhaps. Doesn't matter what you do. What's really important is who you are. But in order for you to know, then you have to come to terms with a few ideas that reside within me and reside within you. I know these things about me, but I want to help to show you these things about you. Being from another world is not nearly as important as being from this one, because this is where the troubles are. Being from somewhere else, I was from somewhere else before I arrived here a few days ago. It wasn't that big a deal to be from Arizona. It shouldn't be that big of a deal to be from another planet. It's just another place. The big deal is that we are here now, and we have the potential to know ourselves, finally. To discover that bit of truth that resides within ourselves, that gives us a link that goes back a very long way. It leads us on a path that takes us to the stars, that moves us into another light, that moves us into a place where once we know ourselves, we're no longer disempowered, but we become empowered. Individually, we're like the old thing I saw in a movie once. You know, the one where they have a straw. You know what a straw is, like straw from the field. And they have one straw and bends it over and breaks it. But you put together 100 straws, and it's very difficult to break. It's that way. Maybe even more powerful. Because you see, there is something called synergy. With a straw, you don't have synergy, you have mass. And the greater the mass, the more power it takes to cause the mass to change. With synergy, the greater the mass, well, the synergistic aspect of this becomes 1,000 times greater, perhaps. Maybe more. Think of it this way. Have you ever bent a spoon, just focused on it and caused it to bend over? Anyone here? There's someone? Another? Anyone over here? Yes? All right. If you haven't, then just imagine it for a moment so you understand this concept. You have a spoon, you focus on it, it bends over. Pretty much just like that. Effortlessly. A thick, heavy spoon. What if everyone in this room could bend a spoon? Just like that, and do it by yourself. But you decided that, what's the big scary thing? Ebola. You've heard about Ebola, right? Well, imagine if everyone here could bend a spoon. This is the synergy. What if everyone said, we don't need this Ebola crap anymore. Let's just use all of our energy together and focus and just get rid of it. You could do that. Everyone is looking for a mechanical means to defeat the issues. Got to go through a mountain, you're going to need to have a big hammer. But that's not how it was done in ages past. And it's not necessary to do it that way now. The synergistic approach is to combine the energies of who you are and to apply that in one single formidable thought to effect a change. This is something that I possess. This is my work as a healer. But it's also something you possess as well. It's not unique to me. It's only unique because I can show you how it's done, that it's possible, and that's what you need to see. But it isn't unique to me. You also possess these same traits. I might recently have come from another world, recently 60 years or more, but you did too. And the same aspect of creation that runs through me, that causes me to work on a person with a bad shoulder or back or terrible cancer, and changes occur. Amazing changes. That same energy runs through you as well. And that's part of the reason why Zoe came to see me that last time, is to let me know that the time is now, that we can change the things that we don't agree with, that are frightening, that threaten us. And there are others who are like me, maybe some of you in the audience, maybe some of you who are watching. And all you have to do is just stand up and be counted. Be who you are, not who you've been told you should be. So I'll open the floor to questions at this point, and then we'll go a little step further from that. Any questions? So the question is, do I have an opportunity to go back where I came from? The answer is, I've been given the opportunity a couple of times, and I've declined both times. And the reason, this is a place that's worth the time and effort. The people here are good people, really. And there's no reason to leave. If I left, what would I do? You know, I mean, what would I do? If I left, it would be because I was afraid or I'd given up. I'm not afraid, nor have I given up. I have hope, and I believe, I don't know yet, but I believe that the best is yet to come. So I have not decided to leave.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You had a question?
You said that there was a change in direction about 9/11 when the World Trade Center, and that have you lost the contact physical or mentally after that, or is it still continuing?
No, the contact that I have continues. It is not the same as it was before.
In what way did it change?
Every 10 years they would come to see me, and now it's at a different interval.
But it is still the same kind of information and what you are going to tell the world or as an audience?
Well, the information that they gave me is the information I'm telling now. The information hasn't changed. They gave me information that went in either direction. If the world went towards peace, then there was a line of information that would go in that direction. If it did not go towards peace, then unfortunately, it was a different message. The question is there a method to keep the state of mental confusion that is created by the grays? There is, but it isn't something I can describe it very easily. The thing to remember about the grays is that they want to get you pulled in and relaxed, so you'll release your free will. If you don't release your free will, there's nothing they can do. But you have to be aware. To be aware is not a state of consciousness. It's a state of presence. And if you're going to be aware, you have to practice awareness. It's when you're not aware that they can use you, and they can put you into a place where they can manipulate you. But if you're not aware, well, then they can use you very easily. The things that cause the greatest problem, and these are things you might have heard, they're very common things: fear and a lack of confidence. If you're afraid, you're vulnerable. If you weren't vulnerable, you wouldn't be afraid, right? If you were confident, you'd have nothing to fear. So these are aspects of how to maintain a level of awareness so you're not manipulated. And it isn't just the grays who are attempting to manipulate you. There are others out there as well. And they certainly don't have your best interests at heart. Yes, I have something to say about that. You know, when you consider who you are, maybe it's time to consider actually who you really are, not who you appear to be, or what other people think you are, or when you look in a mirror, what you see. Because you look in a mirror, you see all the flaws, right? I do. Look at this, all these flaws. And who you consider yourself to be, who do you think you are? And you say your name, and you see yourself, I recognize myself. These are my hands. And your friends, wouldn't they be surprised if they saw you as someone different? Or your husband, or your daughter, or your son, or whatever? The point is that we become who others expect us to be. And in doing this, we slightly alter ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's necessary in a society to slightly shift one way or the other. When you're wanting to protect yourself against these cosmic forces, the bad guys, or the evil, or the darkness, or whatever, quite often we look outside for some support. Some people are looking for God out there. Some people are praying to God out there. Some people are going, I need to bring the light in. I need to bring in the white light. How many of you do that? And it's fine. But I think it's time to now take another step forward. Take a step, one more step a little higher than where you've been. God isn't out there. You can't find God out there any place. I've looked. You find God here. And if you go looking for God in this direction, inside, you find yourself, and you eventually find God. But you can't tell where the boundary lines are, because where you are and where God is, there are no set places. It's all a mixture. And that's why you can look at yourself in a mirror and point to yourself when you're looking in the mirror. You say, God lives here. Because that's where you find God first. I don't know what God is. I've been trying to figure this out for a very long time. Never come to a resolution on this at all. In other worlds, they have their own ideas about what God is. But it all comes down to the same thing. It's a presence. So God lives here. And this is something they taught me. So it isn't unique from me. This is part of their philosophy, let's say. So you're wanting to protect yourselves. You want to bring the light, and you want to be protected with the white light around you, right? Or the violet light, or whatever kind of light there is. Why not just be who you are? Become the light. And all these things that are out there, that are frightening and disturbing, and the grays that are coming and they're trying to do something to you, they have also a connection to the Creator, to whatever God is. If God lives here and you become the light, you no longer have to worry about the darkness coming close, because there isn't any darkness. There's your presence. And it doesn't make you great, and it doesn't make you famous, and it doesn't make you any more special than you already are. But what it does do is it allows the people who see you to understand and to find it within themselves. You light the path for others just because of being here. You're never going to be perfect, and you're never going to walk this path without stubbing your toes or falling down once in a while. I've done plenty of that, and I'm not from here. So, of course, it happens to everyone. No one is perfect. We all have our issues. But when you realize who you are, and then you live as though that were the truth of your existence, then the light that you give off is the light everyone else is looking for and hasn't quite found yet. And it's not your light they're looking for, it's their own. They just don't know it. You want to do great things, you want to keep these things from bothering you, it's awareness. As I said before, it's confidence. But it's confidence in you and awareness of who you are. It's that state of being godlike with each breath you take.